Who's holding the remote control of your life? The hidden habits that decide your money, your future, and your freedom. The question that changes everything. What if I told you that your biggest problem isn't your salary, it isn't inflation, and it isn't the economy? What if the real problem is that you're no longer the one controlling your own life? Every morning, someone decides when you wake up. Someone decides where your attention goes. Someone decides what you buy, what you postpone, what you fear, and what you become. The strange part is that this someone rarely has a face. You don't see it. You don't question it. Yet it quietly shapes every ordinary day you live. Imagine sitting in front of a television. The screen keeps changing. Different channels, different stories, different emotions. You laugh, you worry, you dream. But suddenly, one question appears. Who is holding the remote? Because the screen never changes itself. Someone is always pressing the buttons. Now ask yourself something far more important. Who is changing the channels of your life? Before we continue, I'd like you to do something. If you've ever felt that your life is slowly drifting away from the future you once imagined, write one sentence in the comments. I'm taking the remote back. Then tell me what time it is where you are and what part of the world you're watching from. Maybe someone thousands of miles away is fighting the exact same battle. The lie we have been told. Every single morning, millions of people wake up believing they have only one problem: money. A higher salary, a better job, a bigger business, a smarter investment. They spend years chasing income, while ignoring the person who is supposed to manage that income. That's why two people can earn exactly the same amount of money, yet end up living completely different lives. One builds wealth, the other builds debt. One creates freedom, the other creates pressure. Money was never the deciding factor. The person behind the money always was. Let's run a simple thought experiment. Give $1 million to someone who has never learned to control their daily habits. Now wait 5 years. How much of that fortune do you honestly believe will remain? Now imagine giving only $1,000 to someone who has mastered discipline, focus, and patience. Where could that money be 10 years later? This is why wealth isn't created inside a bank account. It is created long before that, inside your daily routine. Money simply reveals who you already are. Everyone looks at the fruit. Most people admire the fruit, the beautiful house, the expensive car, the successful company, the perfect vacation, the growing investment portfolio. But almost nobody studies the tree, and even fewer look beneath the ground. Because that is where the real story begins. Everything visible depends on something invisible. Every result depends on a process. Every success depends on a system. And every fortune depends on habits that nobody applauds. The greatest transformations in life never begin in public. They begin in silence, far away from the spotlight, far away from applause, far away from social media. Because real growth is almost always invisible before it becomes impossible to ignore. And that is exactly where our story begins.
The invisible pilot. There's a simple experiment I'd like you to try. Don't move, just think back to the first hour of your morning. Can you remember every decision you made? Or did most of it happen without you even noticing? Who reached for the phone first, you or your habit? How many times did you unlock the screen? How many notifications did you check? How many minutes disappeared without your permission? If you're like most people, you probably don't know, and that is where the real story begins. Scientists estimate that much of what we do every single day isn't the result of conscious decisions. It's the result of automatic patterns, repeated, reinforced, and eventually accepted as normal. Psychologists have a name for this phenomenon: Autopilot. Autopilot isn't evil. In fact, it's one of the greatest survival tools the human brain has ever developed. It allows you to walk without thinking, drive familiar roads, tie your shoes, type on a keyboard, brush your teeth. Thousands of tiny actions, performed effortlessly. Your brain loves efficiency. Every repeated behavior is carefully packaged, stored, and turned into a habit, because thinking requires energy. Habits don't. The brain is always trying to save fuel, but here's the problem. The same system that helps you survive can quietly take control of your future. Imagine driving home after work. You've driven the same road hundreds of times. Suddenly, you arrive at your driveway, and then a strange thought appears. I don't even remember the drive. You didn't disappear. Your brain simply handed the steering wheel to autopilot. Now imagine that happening, not for 20 minutes, but for 20 years. The silent theft. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, "Today, I'll destroy my future." Nobody plans to become financially trapped. Nobody dreams of living paycheck to paycheck. Yet every day, millions slowly drift in that direction. Not because they're unintelligent, not because they're lazy, but because their attention has been outsourced. Every notification presses a button. Every advertisement presses another. Every endless scroll pulls your focus a little farther away. Every impulse purchase feels harmless. Every postponed decision seems insignificant. Until one day, your entire life has become nothing more than a series of automatic reactions. You stop choosing. You simply respond. And there's a dangerous difference between the two. Who is really holding the remote? Think about your television. The screen never argues. It simply displays whatever signal it receives. Your mind works in a surprisingly similar way. Feed it fear, and it broadcasts fear. Feed it distraction, and distraction becomes your reality. Feed it discipline, and eventually, discipline becomes your identity. The remote control has always mattered more than the screen, because whoever controls the remote controls the experience. Now ask yourself again, who controls yours? Is it your goals or your impulses? Is it your vision or your notifications? Is it your future or today's entertainment? Every answer writes another page of your life story. The most expensive habit. People often say, "I wish I had more discipline." But what if I told you discipline isn't something you lack? It's something you already have. You check your phone every morning. That's discipline. You buy coffee from the same place every day. That's discipline. You procrastinate at exactly the same time every evening. That's discipline too. The real question isn't whether you're disciplined. The question is, what have you trained yourself to repeat? Because repetition becomes habit. Habit becomes character. Character becomes destiny. Long before your bank account changes, your habits have already decided the direction you're heading. And that brings us to the next question. If habits are the roots of our lives, where do those roots actually grow? To answer that, we need to leave the modern world for a moment and enter one of nature's oldest classrooms, the forest. Because beneath every great tree lies a lesson that almost every human being has forgotten.
Beneath the surface, stand in front of an ancient tree, and you'll probably admire its height, its massive trunk, its endless branches, the way it refuses to bow, even after decades of storms. From where you're standing, it looks powerful, unshakable, almost immortal. But everything you admire is only the visible half of its story, because the real tree is underground, beneath the soil, hidden from every camera, every headline, and every applause. An invisible world is constantly at work. Thousands of roots stretching through darkness, searching, adapting, competing, surviving. The tree doesn't grow upward until it has first grown downward. Nature understands something that most people forget. The strongest foundations are almost always invisible. Every drop of water must first travel through the roots. Every mineral, every source of life, everything the tree will ever become passes through a system that nobody celebrates. No one takes pictures of roots. No one builds monuments to them, yet remove them. And everything above the surface slowly dies. Not immediately. At first, the leaves still look healthy. The trunk still stands. From a distance, nothing seems wrong. But underneath, life has already begun to disappear. The collapse always starts long before it becomes visible. Nature never cheats. Walk through a forest, and you may think every tree lives in peace, but beneath the surface, another story is unfolding. Roots compete for water, for minerals, for space. When resources become scarce, they grow farther. They change direction. They push through stone. They adapt. Or they disappear. Nature doesn't reward comfort. It rewards adaptation. Every living organism is constantly responding to its environment, not because it wants to, because it has to. The question isn't whether change will happen. The question is whether you'll grow with it or be buried beneath it. Your roots. Now leave the forest and look at your own life. Where are your roots? Most people point to their degree, their career, their business, their income. But those aren't roots. Those are branches. Your real roots are hidden inside your ordinary days. The first hour after you wake up, the thoughts you repeat when no one is listening, the conversations you have with yourself after failure, the books you choose, the videos you consume, the people you spend your evenings with, the promises you keep or quietly break. These are your roots, not once a year, every single day. The world celebrates results. Nature celebrates process. The world applauds success. Nature rewards consistency, and consistency is simply a habit repeated long enough to become invisible. The tree doesn't care about motivation. Have you ever noticed that a tree never waits to feel inspired? It doesn't wake up one morning, wondering whether it's motivated enough to grow. It simply does what living things do, again and again and again. Whether the sky is clear or filled with storms, whether someone is watching or no one is. Growth isn't an event, it's a direction. The tree doesn't become mighty because of one perfect season. It becomes mighty because it never stopped growing through imperfect ones. Your financial roots. This is where most people misunderstand wealth. They believe money creates discipline, but the opposite is true. Discipline creates the person who can build, protect, and multiply wealth. Money is like sunlight. It doesn't change the tree. It reveals the condition of its roots. Healthy roots produce stronger branches. Weak roots produce bigger problems. That's why people can win fortunes and lose them. Businesses can explode in growth and collapse just as quickly. Income isn't always the foundation. Character is. Your financial future is already being built inside routines so small they barely seem important. Skipping one unnecessary purchase, reading 10 pages, planning tomorrow before sleeping, saving before spending, choosing purpose over impulse, tiny decisions repeated daily, quietly becoming the roots of an entirely different future. And yet, there is one force strong enough to poison those roots without you even realizing it. It doesn't arrive as a crisis, it arrives as comfort. It whispers tomorrow. Just 5 more minutes, one more episode, one more scroll. And before long, comfort becomes a prison, built one easy choice at a time. That is where our next chapter begins. Comfort is never free. Every prison doesn't need walls. Some are built, one comfortable decision at a time. It begins so quietly, you barely notice it. 5 more minutes in bed, one more episode, one more scroll, one more purchase, one more excuse. Nothing seems dangerous, nothing feels dramatic. In fact, every choice feels harmless, and that's exactly why it works. Because the most expensive habits rarely announce themselves. They arrive disguised as comfort. Comfort isn't the enemy. Your brain was designed to seek it. Thousands of years ago, comfort meant survival, a warm shelter, food, safety, rest. Every reward helped our ancestors stay alive, but the modern world changed the rules without changing the brain. Today, comfort is available everywhere. One tap, one click, one delivery, one swipe. The reward arrives long before you've earned it, and your brain does what it has always done. It says, again, the invisible currency. Most people think they spend money, but money is rarely the first thing they lose. They lose attention, then they lose time, then they lose consistency, and eventually, money follows. Because attention is the first currency of every successful life. Where your attention goes, your habits follow. Where your habits go, your future follows. The wealthiest people in the world don't simply protect their money. They protect their attention because they understand something most people never learn. Money can be earned again. Time cannot. Attention, once scattered, is incredibly difficult to reclaim. Imagine trying to grow a tree while pulling it out of the soil every few minutes. Impossible. Yet that's exactly what constant distraction does to your goals. Every notification interrupts the roots. Every unnecessary comparison drains energy. Every meaningless distraction steals another piece of tomorrow. The cost of automatic living. Think about the last impulse purchase you made. Maybe it wasn't expensive, maybe it cost only a few dollars, but the real price was never the receipt. The real price was the habit it reinforced. Every time you act without intention, you strengthen a pattern. Every repeated pattern becomes easier. Every easier action becomes your default. And one day, you wake up living a life you never consciously designed. You simply inherited it from your habits. This is why financial freedom has very little to do with numbers. It has everything to do with identity. People don't consistently act against who they believe they are. If you believe, well, I've never been disciplined, your brain will collect evidence to prove you right. If you believe, I always give up, every difficult moment becomes another confirmation. But the opposite is also true. The day you begin seeing yourself as someone who keeps promises, even tiny promises, your identity begins to shift. And once identity changes, habits no longer feel forced. They become natural. The person in the mirror. So, who are you becoming? Not tomorrow, today. Forget your dreams for just a moment. Forget your goals. Forget your plans. Look only at your ordinary Tuesday. How do you spend your mornings? What do you consume? What do you avoid? What do you repeat? Because your future is hiding inside your average day, not your best day, not your worst day, your average day. That is the blueprint your life is quietly following. And perhaps the hardest truth of all is this. No one is coming, Che, to take the remote back for you. No mentor, no billionaire, no motivational speaker, no perfect opportunity. The moment you decide to reclaim your attention, to interrupt the autopilot, to choose one conscious action over one automatic reaction, something extraordinary happens. For the first time in a long time, you become the author instead of the audience. And that is where freedom begins. Not financial freedom, not professional freedom, something even more valuable, the freedom to direct your own life. In our final chapter, we'll discover that taking back the remote doesn't require changing everything overnight. It begins with one decision, one habit, one ordinary day, repeated until an extraordinary life becomes inevitable. Take the remote back. Imagine that someone handed you the remote control to your life. Not tomorrow, right now. What would be the very first thing you would change? Would it be your income, your job, your bank account, the city you live in? Maybe. But none of those would matter if the same habits kept making the same decisions, because changing your environment without changing yourself is like planting a healthy tree in poisoned soil. Sooner or later, the roots will tell the truth. The revolution. Nobody sees history, remembers revolutions, but it rarely remembers how they began. Not with armies, not with headlines, but with a single decision, a moment when someone quietly refused to continue living the same way. Your revolution will probably look just as ordinary. It may begin by waking up 30 minutes earlier, by reading 10 pages instead of scrolling, by cooking a meal instead of ordering one, by saving $10 instead of spending $20. No applause, no audience, no dramatic music, just one decision made on purpose, then another and another, until discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like identity. Your life is already voting. Every action you repeat is a vote, not for the person you were, for the person you're becoming. Every unnecessary purchase casts a vote. Every promise you keep casts another. Every excuse, every workout, every distraction, every focused hour is shaping an identity that your future will inherit. The question has never been, will your life change? It already is. The only question is, in which direction? Wealth grows in silence. People often imagine wealth as a single breakthrough, one big investment, one brilliant idea, one lucky opportunity. Nature tells a different story. Forests aren't built overnight, mountains aren't carved in a day, great rivers begin as tiny streams, and extraordinary lives are built exactly the same way, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly, until one day, everyone calls it an overnight success. The mirror test tonight. Before you go to sleep, take a blank sheet of paper. Draw a single line down the middle. On the left, write one title: Habits That Build My Future. On the right, write another: Habits That Quietly Steal It. Then write down everything. From the moment you wake up to the moment your head touches the pillow. No excuses, no editing, no pretending. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see. And sometimes the first act of freedom is simply telling yourself the truth. The final truth. At the beginning of this film, I asked a simple question. Who's holding the remote control of your life now? You know the answer. It was never your job. It was never the economy. It was never luck. It was never the people around you. It was the small decisions repeated so many times that they became invisible until they became your identity, invisible until they became your future. The remote has always been there, waiting, not in your hand, but in every choice you make or avoid making. Every morning, you pick it up, whether you realize it or not. One last promise. If there's only one sentence you remember from this entire film, let it be this: the life you want will never be created by the habits you refuse to change. Not because life is unfair, not because success belongs to someone else, but because every future is built one ordinary day at a time. So when this video ends, don't rush to watch another one. Close the screen, walk into the quiet, sit with yourself, and ask one question: what will I do today that my future self will thank me for? Then do it. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, today. Because freedom doesn't begin when you earn more money. It begins the moment you become the person who deserves to keep it. If this film made you stop and look at your own life differently, don't write great video. Don't write amazing. Write only 4 words. Today, I took it back. Because the greatest victories are rarely loud. Sometimes they begin with a single quiet decision to take the remote back